Hello, I'm Esme Murphy, and welcome to Talking Points. There are only a few people in our community known by just one name. This conversation is with one of those people, Nekima. That's Nekima Levy Armstrong is her whole name. The former president of the Minneapolis NAACP, she is known as an activist who takes on causes with an aggressive but legal manner. She is, after all, an attorney and a former a current law professor too. And in the ice storm that has hit Minnesota, Levy Armstrong has been out front again, making headlines for, along with other protesters, disrupting a church service at the city's church in St. Paul, where an associate pastor is also the acting director of the ICE St. Paul field office. Nekima Levy Armstrong made headlines again when days later she was arrested on charges of interrupting that service, and the Trump administration posted an altered picture of her crying, something that never happened. Nekima Levy Armstrong is with me now. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, this has been everywhere. Let me first ask you about the church service. Was it necessary to disrupt a church service as it was happening?
Well, the reality is, as a Christian who is also an ordained reverend, in my tradition, it is important to speak up when you see injustice. The whole gospel message rests upon this notion of loving our neighbors as we love ourselves. And as we know from the ICE surge that has taken hold of the streets of the Twin Cities, ICE has done anything but demonstrate loving our neighbors. So how is it that a person can serve as a pastor of City's Church in St. Paul, but also serve as the ICE director in St. Paul, at the Whipple Federal Building, condoning the behavior of ICE agents and blaming the protesters, saying that the protesters are aggressive? That is a dichotomy that you cannot reconcile from my perspective. And so when we went into the church, my goal was to ask questions and also to raise awareness about David Easterwood serving in this dual role. And so contrary to right-wing talking points, we didn't storm the church. We walked in the church, we sat down, we participated in the worship service. So we sang songs with members of the congregation, and then the lead pastor, Jonathan Parnell, led us in prayer. I participated in that prayer as a person sitting there. Now, part of Jonathan Parnell's prayer was, "Please chasten us, O Lord, and help us to get our house in order." And after his prayer, and he said, "Amen," I then stood up and started walking towards the front. And I said, "Excuse me, Pastor, did you just pray, 'Please chasten us, O Lord, and help us to get our house in order'?" And he said, "Correct." So he was engaging me in dialogue. And I said, "Well, help me understand, how is David Easterwood serving as a pastor here and also the director of ICE in St. Paul?" And as soon as I mentioned David Easterwood, that's when Pastor Parnell said, "Shame, shame." He didn't want to have the conversation about David Easterwood in front of the congregation.
Well, the video of this incident went viral, caught the attention of the White House. There were comments from the White House and the administration. A few days later, you are arrested, and the White House, actually Kristi Noem, releases a photo of you under arrest, and you look very much the way you do right now, professionally dressed. About an hour or two later, another image of you comes out, that same image, except you are weeping. It's an altered image that the White House put out about you. That has gotten an extraordinary amount of attention. When did you first hear that it happened?
I first heard that the White House released a doctored false image of me when I was in jail in Sherburne County. And that is an arrest that never should have happened, number one. You know, these are trumped up charges for the 9 of us who have been charged by the Department of Justice, which, as we know, lacks credibility. So that's number one. That day after being arrested, we went to court. And the judge actually said that we could be released.
Right.
And during that time, they filed an appeal, the government, and they were supposed to have 1 hour to submit paperwork to have the case heard on whether we should be detained or released. Well, within that hour, the federal courthouse was closed without any explanation, and our lawyers were locked out. meaning that within 8 minutes of that time frame by which the appeal was supposed to be heard, we were actually shackled in 3 different places and placed in the back of a marshal's van and then taken to the Sherburne County Jail. Now, this is important for a number of reasons. Number one, our rights were violated because we shouldn't have been taken to jail without there being a hearing. And number two, the fact that I was in jail meant that my voice was silenced. I couldn't come out and talk to the people who had gathered at the courthouse, over 150 people. I was not aware that this doctored image had been put out because—
So you didn't know?
No, the FBI took my phone and I was locked in Sherburne County Jail. I had no idea. And It was hours later, many hours later, when we were finally able to make phone calls, and I called my lawyer first, Jordan Kushner, and then I called my husband. And my husband is the one that told me that the White House released a doctored image of me. So again, my voice was silenced. I couldn't see the image and I couldn't respond to the image in real time.
It also looked like the doctored image had darkened your skin, which is something that has happened before in other cases. Do you feel that that was the case?
Yes, they darkened my skin. They exaggerated my features. They had tears coming out of my eyes and made me look hysterical. Anyone who has seen me as a lawyer on the front lines, as a former law professor, they've seen me composed. They've seen me speaking truth to power and standing in my truth. And the White House attempted to degrade that image of me. They attempted to defame me, and they attempted to prejudice the case against me because they were, in my opinion, responding to their MAGA base, which not only sent death threats, not only sent expletive-laden emails to me and some of my co-defendants, but they also used a lot of vile racial slurs against me. And these are the very people—
On social media?
On social media, through my email, calling my phone as well. These are the very people who Donald Trump was trying to appease, along with the other leaders within the White House, by targeting me as a Black woman who is a leader in this community.
Is there anything that you can do? I mean, the case is the case, and you've been charged with violating the FACE Act, which is— I'm going to get into that in a little bit because that's really an unusual charge. But is there anything you can do about the doctored image? First of all, and again, Christine Noem, hours before the doctored image, posted the actual image, which clearly shows you not crying. And you also released a video of your arrest that clearly shows you not crying.
Not only was I not crying, I was composed, I was calm, I was cool, and I was collected. And I also was conversing with the FBI agents regarding my arrest, because just hours earlier, they had actually tackled another Black woman in the hallway of my hotel, thinking that it was me. They roughed her up, they physically abused her, slammed her head on the vehicle, and then they took her to the Whipple Federal Building, thinking that she was me. And she asked to see an arrest warrant, and they showed her an arrest warrant with my name on it. And she let them know I'm not Nekima. And so once I was actually trying to turn myself in, at that point, I let the FBI know, look, you did this to one of my friends. And that was uncalled for. I don't want to be physically abused. I have a brain tumor. I don't want to be roughed up. And so I was very clearly advocating for my rights during that time and having a conversation with them. And so for the White House to flip the entire narrative through that doctored image is not only unconscionable, but it's diabolical. It was unnecessary. This wasn't just a meme. This was a way of caricaturizing me as a Black woman, just as they have done my ancestors, putting out images of Black people with darkened skin as Sambos and Mammies as a way of dehumanizing us and degrading us. And that is what the White House did to me. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a meme. It was a way of tapping back into the history of people who have been enslaved and degraded in this country.
Let me ask you about the journalist Don Lemon, who's now an independent journalist. Many people know him from his years at CNN. He actually can be heard on the tape of the incident at the church saying, "I'm not with the group. I'm a journalist. I'm covering this." Yet he was arrested and charged, and that has created an outcry from journalist groups across the nation. Was he part of your group?
Well, first, let me add that Don Lemon was not the only journalist who was arrested. Georgia Fort, who is a locally respected journalist, she is a mother, she is a Black woman, she was also arrested. And she was there just like Don Lemon, simply doing her job. Neither of the two are activists, organizers, or protesters. They are journalists. And they were there to document what was happening in real time. There was no reason for any of us.
They were not part of the group.
No, they weren't a part of the group. I mean, that should be obvious for anyone, that they were doing their job. And I would hope that journalists around America would understand this is yet another attack on the free press. How often has Donald Trump called legitimate media fake news? How often has he sued media companies for posting stories about him and his authoritarian ways? And now here we have him targeting not one, but two African-American independent journalists who were simply doing their job.
All right.
That's unacceptable.
Well, Nekima Levy Armstrong, we certainly appreciate it, and we will be following your case that gets its way through federal court. An unusual case with the FACE Act, which actually is normally used to make sure that people don't interfere with an abortion process. I think a lot of people don't realize that. But anyway, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And that does it for this edition of Talking Points. As always, please email me with comments or suggestions at esme@cbs.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Esme Murphy, WCCO TV.